My dad passed away in 2013. His last words to me were, "Whatever it takes, you protect your mom and you fight to keep Steve in prison." Catina Salarno was only 18 years old when she was shot in the head and killed by her boyfriend. With the flash of a gun, my whole world just got turned upside down. Stephen Burns was convicted of murdering Catina Salarno in 1979. He just looks dangerous. It's like a killer face. If you looked at his eyes, there is nothing behind him. He has no soul. My name is Nina Salarno, and I am the sister of Catina. Stephen Burns was sentenced to 17 years to life. In 1990, after just 10 years, Stephen Burns came up for parole. My parents, my sister Regina, myself, and friends and family traveled to Vacaville State Prison to protest his release. As a father, I closed her casket and buried my 18-year-old child who was murdered by this animal. God damn it, this is a body bag of my daughter. This is what you did to her, Steve. 46 years since Keena's death has not diminished 1 ounce of that pain. Where are we going? We are heading to the San Joaquin County District Attorney's Office. I am shaky. Very shaky. You are right now. How many parole hearings have you told? Number 13. You've been at every single one of these? Yes, every single one. As Steve Burns heads into his 13th parole hearing, what are you thinking? I'm thinking that he's no longer a risk to commit the kind of crime he committed coming into prison. I've known Steve Burns for over 2 decades. I don't think he's a serious danger if he were to be released. If somebody looked at this and said, "It's been 45 years. Is this now just about vengeance?" No, it's not. Keeping Steve in jail is not about vengeance. For me, it's fear. Fear for my family. I think he has a very good chance of being found suitable. Isn't it likely at one of these hearings he's going to get out? That's my biggest fear, is him getting out. Heat, heat, music, music. It shook the entire campus at the University of the Pacific. A freshman on her first day of college in 1979. Found unconscious, bleeding from her head in a remote area of the school. Her name was Catina Salarno. Harriet and Mike Salarno were getting ready for bed when the phone rang at their San Francisco home. Mike answered it. His tone signaled the news, and I said, "What? What's wrong?" He says, "Keena's been shot, and she's in the emergency room." The Salarnos' 2 younger daughters, Regina and Nana, rushed to their side. Then the phone rang again and they said, "Your daughter passed away." I don't think it can be described in words what it's like to watch your mom collapse crying. My dad, very, very strong man, but you could tell he was shaken to the core. And life just stopped. Life stopped. Completely stopped. "You got the keys to the car?" "Yeah." 48 Hours first met the Salarno family in 1990. Harriet and Mike were making their weekly visit to Keena's resting place. I think coming out here and being able to talk to Catina gives me a peace of mind also that I can still communicate with my daughter that it isn't, the final end. At the time, Catina had been gone for 10 years, and her family was just embarking on a decades-long journey to keep her killer behind bars. It's the first skirmish in a long, long battle that we started today. It was not a journey they had ever expected to make. Harriet, did you and Michael really have the perfect life as parents? 3 kids? Yes. To answer you, yes. We were so blessed. Both Mike and Harriet were juvenile commissioners assigned by the city of San Francisco to mentor boys and girls. Their arms and home were always open, says Nina, the youngest daughter. I think the best way to describe it is it typified a middle-class American family that valued their faith, valued family, valued community as well. They spent blissful summer days at the cabin in the mountains. 3 carefree sisters with Catina leading the pack, says Regina, younger by 18 months. She was the heart and soul of the family. She had such a good heart. She loved being the older sister. Music. I think the best way to describe Catina is she is that person every person should meet in their life. She just brought an air of kindness, When Kina was 14, a new family, the Burns, moved in across the street in San Francisco. There were 4 children, a girl and 3 boys, all about the same age as the Salarno sisters, and we were spying on them. So we all made a big batch of cookies, giggled all the way across the street, knocked on the door, introduced ourselves, and gave him a batch of homemade cookies. Soon, the friendship between the oldest solo sister and the second oldest Burns brother blossomed into a young love. Kina and Stephen Burns started dating in the 10th grade. How would you describe Stephen Burns? Well, he was a big brother I never had, and for me it was like, God, I have a big brother, and I just thought he was great because we got to go to the football games. Steve, who went to an all-boys Catholic school, was a star athlete and captain of the football team. He and Na, a basketball and volleyball player, bonded over their shared love of sports. I loved Steve. I idolized him. He was a great athlete. He coached my team. He would help me with my shot, and he took the time to do that. Mike took Steve, who had a difficult relationship with his own dad, under his wing. Music. He not only mentored him, he gave him a job at his TV store delivering TVs. And my dad, who embraces everybody, brought him in and treated him as a son. Mike trusted him completely, says Regina. They all did. Did you ever see anything that between Steve and Kina that worried you? I have to tell you, I've given hours and hours of thought of that. Why didn't I see this? What was it? You sometimes are close to people. You don't always see little signs or you ignore them. But with hindsight, the sisters say there were signs. In her senior year, Kina, who had been accepted to the University of the Pacific, wanted to break up with Stephen, but he wasn't having it, says Regina. He started threatening her. She said that Steve said that if I broke up with him, he would kill me. But at the time, neither sister took him seriously. Neither one of you told your parents. We just figured he was just saying it. And because of what our relationship was over the years, why would we believe that? He enjoyed being part of their family. Why would he destroy a family that he loved? Mike and Harriet never heard about that incident, never imagined that the life they knew would come to an end. We thought we were doing good and everything would be fine, and never thought the boy across the street would murder our daughter. When Kina arrived at the University of the Pacific, UOP, in September of 1979, she thought she had left Stephen Burns behind for good. He said he was going to Santa Clara University and she was going to begin pursuing her longtime goal. She knew she was going to become a dentist. She knew exactly what she was going to do. It was planned for her. That was her goal, her dream. But Kina's excitement was cut short soon after the Salarnos got to campus. We were staying overnight, and we went to the hotel lobby, and then, all of a sudden, there's Steve and his sister and family, and we're like, "What are you doing here?" And he says, "Well, I'm going EOP." That's really the first time I heard a lot of panic in her voice because that just caught her off guard. For the first time, Kina turned to her father for help. My dad walked up to him and said, "Okay, Steve, leave Kina alone. She has told you that. You guys move on to your own ways. Be friends and know that I will always be here for you." The Salarnos headed back to San Francisco, and Sina and Steve each moved into their respective dorm rooms on opposite sides of the campus. Stephen's new roommate, Les Serpa, remembers walking in the room and seeing Kina's picture everywhere. He said his girlfriend was at Pacific as well. There were pictures of her and him together. More pictures than I had ever seen before, but they were everywhere on his desk. He didn't mention that she had wanted to break up. Not at all. It was all very positive. Everything was great. Across campus, Kina was settling in with her new roommate, Joanne Marks. Then came a knock on the door. It was Steve Burns. After he left, Kina told me that he wanted to meet with her later in the evening for the last time. She was not looking forward to meeting with him, but she was looking forward to it being the last time. She believed that he would stop bothering her. Joanne says Steve came by to pick up Kina about 7:45 that evening. Kina told Joanne she would see her later, have a good evening, but that later never came. Grunted. I think it was probably close to here. A freshman out for a walk named Kevin Arland would be the one to discover why it was around 9:45 at night when he saw something on the sidewalk. And I kept walking and realized that's a person and figured I needed to go get some help. Kevin, unnerved by what he saw, rushed back to his dorm and got a resident advisor. They both ran back to the scene and we got up to her, and it was a young lady that was laying on the ground and she was still alive. She was unconscious, but there was a big pool of blood around her head. Kevin would later find out it was 18-year-old Catina Rose Salarno. She had been shot in the back of the head. Her arms were twisted in a way that I never thought the human body could twist. Do you remember her face? I just remember the blood. That had to be heartbreaking. Yeah, I knew it was tragic. I knew it was very serious, a very serious injury. While the two men waited for the ambulance to arrive, Stephen Burns returned to his dorm room where his roommate Les was watching Monday Night Football. He went and laid on the bed, propped up a pillow, and started watching the game. Do you see? Nervous at all? He was not nervous at all. The ambulance arrived around 1:00 p.m. and rushed Catina to St. Joseph's Hospital. She was still alive, barely. Years later, her family would learn she was not alone. Randy Haight, at the time, a young patrol officer who was at the crime scene, met his partner at the hospital. I said, "Where's the family?" And he says, "She's a student at UOP from out of town. They're not here." I said, "Is anybody with her?" He says, "Haven't seen anybody. It's just us." Catina Rose was pronounced dead at 9 minutes after midnight. We made the decision to sit with Catina until the coroners came. Even though she had passed, I just didn't feel right leaving her alone. I prayed. I said a prayer for her. By then, homicide detectives were at Keena's dorm talking to Joanne. I told the police that Catina had been picked up by Steve Burns, and I told them which dorm he was from. Les and Stephen were in their room when there was a knock on the door. I opened the door and, there's like 5 guys out there in suits. So I stepped out a little bit, say hello, and I could see at the end of each hall was full of police officers. And then they asked to search our room. They went through everything. Every bag, every drawer, everything. What were they looking for? I didn't know at the time, but later I learned they were looking for a weapon, for a gun. Stephen Burns was pulled from the room and taken to the Stockton police station where he was fingerprinted and photographed. Officer Hay recalls seeing him there. He did not appear to be upset in any way. Burns told the police he didn't meet Catina on campus that night and that he spent the evening in his dorm room watching Monday Night Football. Without the gun, it was never found. The police didn't have enough evidence to hold him. Stephen Burns was released. His father took him back to San Francisco. The police didn't publicly name a suspect, but Harriet Salarno didn't need a name. She already knew it. I just said to Mike, "It's Steve. Mike, it's Steve." I don't know why. I just had that feeling. After talking to the family, the police learned that Stephen had threatened to kill Catina if she broke up with him. 2 days after the murder of Catina Rose Salarno, Stephen Burns was arrested at his home just across the street from where Catina grew up. I remember sitting up in the window watching them walk him out in handcuffs and putting him in the patrol car. My whole world got taken from me and really the flash of a gun. I mean, everything was gone. Music. Learning to live without their daughter has been a lifelong journey for Keena's parents, one crippled by what-ifs. Mike Salarno never stopped blaming himself. He felt that as a father, he let her down. For decades, Keena's sisters have also grappled with regret, wishing they had told their parents about Stephen Burns threatening to kill Catina. What if I had said something? What if we told them about the threat? You're living with guilt too, and it doesn't change after 40 years. It's the hole in my heart for missing my sister and what we could have had together. Music. In the wake of the murder, each member of the family retreated into their own private grief. I didn't even care if I even lived. I wanted to join Catina. I didn't know what to do anymore. My whole plan, my whole world, my whole bubble blew up. I mean, I never felt that kind of hurt. I lost my entire family because they fell apart. It was painful enough that my sister had been murdered, but the person that I viewed as a brother and loved betrayed me by taking her life. The Salarnos would learn that the young man they had trusted had stolen a gun from Mike's store weeks before Keena's murder. You believe he planned that murder? Oh, yes. The fact that he stole the gun prior, there was no reason for the stealing of the gun otherwise. They came to believe Stephen may have been planning to use that gun to kill Sina, even before she left for college. The night before we took her to UOP, I heard this noise outside, and it was Steve Burns pacing in front of the bedroom window. He had a big white towel wrapped around his left hand. Regina says Burns tried to climb up the side of their house and enter through the window of the bedroom. The girls shared, but Keena told him to leave, and she said, "No, I'm not opening the window. Go to bed, Steve. Go. I'm going to school tomorrow. Stop. Just stop. Just stop." Then there was a sound like he fell, and it was a very distinct sound of metal hitting metal. What do you think now when you look back on that sound of metal against metal? I think if I had opened the window and he got in, there'd be 3 dead girls. You think he had a gun with a map? Absolutely. 6 months after Keena's death, 19-year-old Stephen Burns went on trial for her murder. It was a bitter awakening for the Salarnos, who say there was more concern for the defendant and his rights than there was for his victim. Neither of Keena's parents were allowed in the courtroom, not even while Na, who was only 14 years old at the time, took the stand. She had to testify at the trial on her own, without a victim's advocate to support her. What was that like on the stand? G8. I think the best word was just awful. I was in a courtroom. The only person I knew in the courtroom was the guy that had murdered my sister. The prosecution argued that Burns met Keena that night carrying the stolen gun with the intention of killing her if she wouldn't continue their relationship. Still, the jury did not convict him of premeditated first-degree murder. He was found guilty of second-degree murder and was sentenced to 17 years to life with the possibility of parole. We all thought 17 years to life meant life, that they would never let him out. He should be in prison the rest of his life. They would learn they were wrong. Just 10 years into his sentence, Stephen Burns came up for parole. The Salarnos were outraged. I had no idea the parole system was so rotten. Here they are in 1990 talking to then 48 Hours correspondent Bernard Goldberg the night before the first parole hearing. Okay, Stephen Burns was handed down a 17 to life sentence. Here we are, 10 years later. That's right. But you don't want him out after 17 years, after 20 years, after 25. Is that fair? Oh, that's a very fair question. Absolutely. I don't want him out. But I don't even want to go up there before 17 years because that's what I was told. Going into this hearing, they know there's a chance he could get out. On March 28, 1990, the Salarnos and a bus full of supporters headed to Stephen Burns' parole hearing. That bus ride was the longest ride in my life. First, hardest thing was when she died. This is the second. For the first time since Sina's murder, the Salarnos confronted the man they had once considered part of the family. Steve sentenced my daughter to death forever. I asked for a fair trade. I ask you to sentence Steve to life in prison. Then it was Burns' turn to speak. It's hard to say in words how difficult it is to live day to day about the feelings I have inside about what I did, and, regardless of what I do, I can't bring Keena back. But I know this, that I am deeply sorry for what I did, and I will work each day of my life, whether it be in prison or out on outside, to make up. He apologized, but the Salarnos noticed he never looked at them while he did it. If you can't look at someone in the face and say you're sorry, then you know, damn, we're all going to be sorry. After an excruciating wait, we don't know what those commissioners are thinking right now. The parole board came back with a decision. Stephen Burns was found unsuitable for release, but he would get another chance at freedom in 2 years. 2 years. We got 2 years, and I feel very, very drained, and I know my family is so worn out. 2 years. What about the Salarno family? We'll be back. And back they would come over and over again for the next 35 years. Music. There is one thing you can count on with the Salarnos. Every week for almost 46 years, you're right. They've gone to the cemetery where Kina now rests. I'm going to get the water out of the flowers. These days, there's another grave to tend. Mike Salarno died in 2013 of cancer. There's something else you could be sure of. Every time Stephen Burns comes up for parole, they will be there. Thank you for the strength that you impart on all of us. And as we face this next parole hearing, we all said we would be back, and we've continued to be back 12 times. Not just because he murdered Kina, but because he is a dangerous murderer that will kill or harm again. And that's just the bottom line. In January 2025, they were about to go to their 13th parole hearing. Give this family the strength to continue to fight. That fight for victims' rights has shaped all of their lives. Was I going to be a nurse 40 years ago? No. And now I am. The reason why I did it is because I swore nobody would die alone. Na was so traumatized by the trial, she vowed she would become a prosecutor. And so she did. She became a specialist in domestic violence cases. I believed, like my sister, so many victims are either not heard, afraid to be heard, or just don't understand the magnitude of what's happening to them. She became the DA in Modoc County, cowboy country about as far north in California as you can get. Being able to be out in the mountains or work on a cattle ranch to ride my horses and have that time is just, it's who I am. Harriet went on to start Crime Victims United, an organization that has changed hundreds of laws. Before Harriet Salarno, victims in California weren't allowed to give impact statements at sentencing. Now they are. Parents, even if witnesses, can now attend the trial. And children, unlike Nina, must now be accompanied by a support person when testifying. She's my hero. I mean, absolute hero. And it's just so significant to see how she supports people and just really fights for what's right. I have a passion. For Harriet, that has meant fighting to keep Stephen Burns behind bars. Been doing it for 45 years, and I will continue to do it as long as I'm alive and as long as he's in prison. Stephen Burns has been in prison for 45 years, but the Solos are convinced he hasn't changed. He still has yet to admit to the facts of the crime. Stephen Burns' story says Deputy District Attorney Robert Himmelblau has changed at least 12 times over the years. He had said repeatedly that Kina pulled the gun, that Catina was the one who had the revolver, ignoring the fact that we knew that he had stolen Kina's father's revolver. Sometimes she shot him. Sometimes they struggled over the gun and it accidentally went off. In 2016, 37 years after the murder, Stephen finally stopped lying about Kina's actions, says Nina. He told the commissioners, quote, I became very, very angry, and I pulled out a gun and shot Kina. But Stephen continued to deny that he stalked her to UOP to kill her if she didn't get back together with him. The shooting of the gun murdered my sister, but the behaviors and the need for his power and control and the obsessiveness is what makes him dangerous. And according to a complaint brought up at the last parole hearing, he has shown those same obsessive behaviors inside prison. A professor who taught incarcerated students reported that Burns' behavior towards her was, quote, disturbing and manipulating. He was relentless towards her because she would not allow him into a class. He focused on her and was not going to stop till he got what he wanted. Do you think that if Stephen Burns is released, he could hurt someone? Yes. The next woman he goes, out with who says no. But there are some who believe that Stephen Burns deserves a second chance. Kevin Anderson, once a respected pediatrician, got to know Burns when he was incarcerated, also for murder. After 24 years in prison, Kevin was released on parole in 2023. He started working as a counselor. We first spoke to him the day before Stephen's 2025 parole hearing. Do you think that Stephen Burns is a danger to society? I can't say 100%, but I do think that Stephen Burns has done a lot of the work to get to that point where you're no longer a danger to society. Stephen has earned a college degree and has worked with hospice patients. He has participated in numerous anger management and rehabilitation programs, some alongside Kevin. I think that he has the tools now that he didn't have before. Kevin worked with Steve in mock hearing sessions to help him prepare for the upcoming parole hearing. We had to push him. And once we got him to get off of the denial on certain issues where the real honesty had to come out, now he's able to talk about it in the honest terms that maybe he wasn't able to do 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Kevin says Stephen told him he snapped when Kina rejected him. She said, "I want you to stay away from me and my family." And he said, "At that point, I just lost it." And as he was describing this, he was crying because now he realizes where he was going with this and what this was leading to. And Kina saw it too, says Kevin. He described to me her body language, what her eyes were doing, how they had just grown really big. I said, "What else?" And he said, her voice was shaking. And I said, "And what did that mean to you?" And he would say, "It meant she was scared to death." But it didn't stop him. Stephen Burns shot the woman he claimed to love in the back of the head and walked away, leaving her to slowly bleed to death. Did he say why he left and didn't get help for? He did say that what he did afterwards was a very cowardly act. Stephen Burns is about to get another chance to convince commissioners that the same man who left Sina to die that night is a changed man. And this time, the Salarnos fear the odds are in his favor. It scares the living daylights out of me having him come out. Music, music. As Harriet Salarno counts down the days to the 2025 hearing, she does what she's done for the past 4 decades. She goes to work. At 92, Harriet still goes to the office at Crime Victims United every day. We're going to use these at the Pearl hearing. Harriet and Nina are picking out photos to show the commissioners at the parole hearing. Here's Kina. I think that's her 16th. It's important that they understand that she was a beautiful human being. Her dog was very important to her, and her life was taken for no reason. Nina has been preparing for this hearing for months, and in here, I keep everything from the trial to all those subsequent parole hearings. Nina, the prosecutor, is leaving. Nothing to chance. Like, here's transcripts for the 2010 hearing. But, nah. The protector is calling on Kina and her dad to help the things she can't control. As a DA, Na knows his chances of getting out are better than ever. Keith Whatley is founder of Uncommon Law, an organization that helps incarcerated people navigate the parole process. From what I've seen so far on paper in terms of the time he's done, the program that he's put together for himself, and how well he's performed there, he does seem like somebody who under the law should be granted parole. Whatley, who has never met Stephen but has reviewed his last 2 parole transcripts, says Stephen has 2 other important things going for him. His age, he was only 18 when he committed the crime. California has passed laws to say that we have to consider someone's youth at the time of the crime. None of us are fully developed in the brain before we're age 25, and his age at the time of the hearing, 63. Whatley says he's eligible for special consideration under the Elderly Parole Program. He says people simply age out of crime, especially violent crime. But in Stephen Burns' case, isn't there a possibility that if he gets out, he gets involved with someone and they leave him, he'll do the same thing? It's a great question. It's an important question. The science and the statistics say no. They say that people who come home from a life sentence are among the least likely to recidivate. That's just true. But sometimes statistics are no match for the human spirit. When the family comes consistently to these parole hearings, especially a family like the Salarnos, doesn't that make it much more difficult for someone like Stephen Burns to get a chance at parole? I would say yes. Yes, it does have an impact on the process. The Salarnos are praying they'll make an impact again this time. Thank you for allowing us to be able to be a voice for Kina. Harriet, Nena, her daughter Lexi, and a group of loyal friends head to the DA's office in Stockton, California, where they will attend the parole hearing via video, the post-COVID new normal. But won't hearing all this today make you relive everything? It does. It really does. I am shaky. Very shaky, right? You are right now. Yes, I'm afraid of him being released. I'm just afraid that he'll come after us. Harriet braces herself as she heads into the conference room, knowing she will have to again see the man who put her daughter in a grave. Looking at Steve Burns when he walked in, he just looks dangerous. He acts dangerous, and what he says is dangerous. 48 Hours was not allowed to record video or audio during the hearing, but I was able to sit with the family and friends to observe. Stephen Burns, his affect flat, his voice monotone, once again denied he planned to kill Sina that night. This audio was recorded by the parole board. But you didn't plan to kill her. No, and you deny that you threatened to kill her previously, correct? Yes. Do you understand why previous panels have found that you minimize what you did and your intentions? Based on that? Yes. After almost 4 hours, the commissioners retreated to make their decision. Is this the hardest part? Just waiting to see. This is the most difficult part. 20 minutes later, the family was called back into the conference room. The decision was in. Even after 45 years in prison, we see very little change on those issues that led you to murder Kina, that led you to do things in prison that offended others. We see very little change. Stephen Burns was found unsuitable for parole. I don't know. Go home in circles. Really sweet tonight. This is the first real smile I've seen on your face. Oh, you did a great job, Mom. I'm very proud of you. When Kevin Anderson, Stephen's friend from prison, read the transcript of the hearing, he was stunned. He sent 48 Hours an email, some of which I read to him. When we spoke again after the hearing, reading this transcript is hurting my head, heart, and soul. This man is absolutely not ready to be released. No. The way he came across in that hearing, he was absolutely not ready. All the work he has done, I didn't see it showing up there at all. 4 days after the hearing, Na and Harriet went to deliver the news. We got a 5-year denial, Dad. So, I'm still holding strong to my promise to you. It was Kina's 64th birthday. Kina, it's the best birthday present I think we can give you. Was that denial? So, thank you for watching over Mom and watching over everyone. Happy birthday, Kina. I love you both so much and miss you. Her former high school boyfriend viciously attacked her. He is going to do this to another person. A survivor speaks out. For the first time. He's more like a monster. I need to make sure he is put away for murder. 48 Hours is all new CBS next Saturday, 10:09 Central, and streaming on Paramount+. Music. Welcome back to Mortem. I'm your host, Anne Marie Green, and today we are speaking with 48 Hours correspondent Erin Moriarty about the case of Catina Rose Salarno. In 1979, Kina was shot on campus at the University of the Pacific in California. It was the first day of her freshman year, and the assailant was her high school boyfriend, Stephen Burns. Catina was just 18 years old at the time. Now, Burns was convicted of second-degree murder in 1980, and he's been in prison for 4 decades. Sina's family wants to keep it that way. They have attended every single parole board hearing, 13 in total, to advocate against his release. So, Erin is joining us now. Erin, thank you so much. Well, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, Amory, because this case, as you're going to hear, was eye-opening on so many different levels. I've seen it all, but I hadn't seen this, and so I want to talk about it. Yeah, we don't talk often about this sort of component of the criminal justice system, the parole system. So I'm looking forward to digging into it. I do want to remind everyone that if you haven't already listened to this episode of 48 Hours, You can find it in your podcast stream just above this one. Go ahead, go listen, and then come on back. Catina Salarno and Stephen Burns. They were high school sweethearts. They lived across the street from each other. But when Catina tried to break up with him, Burns threatened to kill her. She left, and she went to college, and she was absolutely shocked when he turned up at the same college as her. They had discussed this before, and he was supposed to be going to another college. They go off to their separate dorms to settle in, but he asks to speak with her, and she agrees to do so. She tells her roommate, "I'll be back." She never comes back. So, what I found, just as a journalist, very, very impressive, is the sheer number of people you all were able to track down from decades ago. We're talking about Catina's roommate. The then young student who stumbled upon Catina fighting for her life in the middle of campus. The patrol officer who stayed in her hospital room because he did not want her to be alone. Talk to me about how you all managed to get in contact with all of these people and convince them to participate. It wasn't me. I'm as impressed as you are. We have these amazing producers, people who were willing to dig, and as you point out, they had to go back 45 years. And they managed to find so many people from that time, and what that allowed us to do with this story was bring the past alive in a way that is remarkable but also heartbreaking. And, as you mentioned, Randy Haight, who was the patrol officer, young back then, 45 years ago, and it's so moving to hear, when he gets to the hospital, he's wondering why no one in the family is there. But that's because they're in San Francisco. She's a student at the college and her parents can't get there yet, and so he doesn't leave her. He and another officer stay there until she dies and until the coroner gets there. And it's so moving. He's still friends with the family and even went to the very last parole hearing. Wow. And then to be able to talk to these now grown-up roommates of both Catina and Stephen Burns. And I think what really hit me was that event so struck Stephen. Burns' roommate Les, who really only knew him for a day, realized this was the first day of college, really, and he comes back with two really interesting stories, as one, of course, is that Stephen had already come into that room and set up a shrine to Catina. And so I had asked him, and I said, well, did he happen to mention that she had broken up with him? And he goes, no. He said, I saw more pictures than I'd ever seen. And also, I was struck by the fact that Les had told us that he had been watching Monday Night Football when Stephen came back. But Stephen told the police he had been there all night, so that gives you a real sense right away from the beginning who Stephen Burns was. Absolutely. The other thing that kind of was really brought home to me by seeing all these people is the amount of time that has passed and who Catina could have been, 'cause here they are, they're all grown up. They've lived whole lives, whole careers. Wow. Who would she have been if she had been allowed to sort of live these next 4 decades? Right, but Emery, there is something really special. Even though she never got a chance to live her life, she lives on in these people's lives. What was so interesting to me is they hadn't forgotten her. That one act by Stephen Burns didn't mean just the end of her life or affect her family. It affected so many people's lives, and Les was talking as if it had happened yesterday. And Randy Haight, the officer who sat there, is still, you could see him thinking back to that night. So, she never got a chance to live her life, but she certainly made an impact. Indeed. So, this is not the first time that 48 Hours
the first
has actually
report on the case was done in 1990 by
and
correspondent
I love it when we can kind of go
Goldberg.
into the archives. Yes, it was. Bernard Goldberg was the very first correspondent with 48 Hours, and I've been around long enough to remember Bernard Goldberg. And I actually joined as a full-time correspondent 3 years later, but he was the very first, and really was a terrific correspondent at the time, and that was a time when 48 Hours, where we got the name, was we would spend 48 hours or more on a story. And so you really see it even when you see Bernard talking to the family during our hour of how much time he was spending with them. Because he was spending a lot of time with them on the fly as they were going to the very first parole hearing. Yeah. I mean, he's sort of talking very comfortably. Yeah. We would go everywhere with people till we would joke that they would be so tired of us, and I could tell when someone I was interviewing would say, "Yes, Erin, because I've been there for 48 hours. So Bernard Goldberg spent a lot of time with his family to see what would happen at that very first parole hearing. So then why did 48 Hours decide to update viewers on this case? Was it because there was another parole hearing coming up? I mean, who would have thought that there would have been so many parole hearings between then and now? Amory, we stay on stories for a long time. And yes, it was because there was the 13th parole hearing, and I have to tell. You remember I said this was eye-opening. In my mind, he was finally going to get out. I mean, I didn't realize all the elements that really go in to determine whether someone should get parole or not. I thought it was really good that you explored that idea, asking, listen, like, what is justice? What is the system for? Are you sure that you're in the pursuit of justice, or is this just like a personal thing? Because, it's hard to get over someone taking someone you loved. I thought the way you explored it was delicate but direct. Well, and the California law does allow for parole when somebody is judged to be suitable for parole. So you had to wonder what was the motive behind the family keeping him in. And so I did think we had to raise it. But they said he stalked her, and he would never admit at these parole hearings that he had stalked her. And so their concern was that if he was ever out, he could still hurt somebody by stalking or controlling behavior, even if he didn't kill someone. I didn't understand that until I worked on this story. We're going to dig in a little bit more to that, but I just want to ask you, something about the court case, which was really surprising to me. I know it was back in 1980, but Keena's two sisters, Regina and Nina, they testified in Burns' trial, but Nena was just 14 years old, and she had to testify without her parents in the courtroom. They were not allowed. Why? She was a minor. Well, it's really interesting. The Salarno said that when they first went to this trial, they thought that there was more attention and more concern for the defendant's rights than victims' rights. Harriet and Michael were not allowed into the trial because they were on the witness list. And back then, that was the thought that if you're going to testify at a trial, you can't be at the trial because it could affect your own testimony. Na, who was only 14, had to testify against Stephen Burns, the young man who had been her friend. She saw him as a brother. No one else was allowed to go in with her. Her parents weren't in the court, and so they did not want to have other victims go through what they did. So Harriet made it her life's work to help other victims. And so now, because of Harriet's group, now a young person who has to testify goes in with a support person. So they've made a difference for other victims. Welcome back. In 1980, Stephen Burns was found guilty of secondary murder, and he was sentenced to 17 years to life with the possibility of parole. The Salarnos have attended 13 parole hearings for Burns since that time. Erin, I don't think I knew exactly how the parole system works, but 13 sounds like a lot. Why was he up for parole so many times? Well, every state is different, but what happens is at a parole hearing, the commissioners don't just decide whether you are suitable or unsuitable for parole. They also decide how much time they're going to give you to clean up your act. And so it could be 2 years, it could be 5 years. And that's what happened. And so the Salarnos, they didn't have to come back each time, but they did come back every single time. So this is really interesting because you interviewed Kevin Anderson, who was once a pediatrician and formerly incarcerated with Burns. He now counsels, or he's a counselor, and he worked with Burns in mock hearing sessions to prep him for his last parole hearing. Very interesting. Kevin told you that he felt that Burns did deserve to be released. How did you connect to Kevin, and how does he feel now? So, of course, we asked Stephen Burns to speak with us. And I was hopeful he might, but he did not. What he did instead was suggest that we talk to Kevin Anderson. And Kevin Anderson did give us a lot of insight into Stephen Burns, and when I first met him, which was right before the 13th parole hearing, he said that he had worked with him while He was still in prison. He had gotten out on parole and thought that Stephen Burns had finally come to accept the behaviors that had led to the shooting. He even described what Stephen had told him about how he had looked at Kina and seen the fear in her eyes. And another big question in this, which is almost as troubling, is the fact that he shot his girlfriend. She didn't die immediately. He didn't call 911. So it wasn't just that he shot her, he let her die. He goes back to his dorm and starts watching Monday Night Football and never says a word. When I talked to Les said he didn't even look nervous. So, Kevin Anderson said to us this time, he actually admitted what a coward he had been. So Kevin thought this is what he's going to tell the parole board, this 13th parole board, and that he's finally going to admit to the behaviors that led to him thinking it was okay to kill his girlfriend if she didn't want to be with him anymore, but he didn't. No, he did not. So, how does Kevin feel about him? Now, I've got to give a lot of credit to Kevin Anderson. I was very impressed with him because when he read the transcript from that 13th parole hearing, he was shocked. And so, he wrote Liza. Finley, who was the producer of this show, and God bless him, he said, "Oh my gosh, I was wrong. This guy is not ready for parole." Can you believe this, that Kevin Anderson said? And so I had to be back in San Francisco anyway, which is where Kevin Anderson is, and I went back to have him explain, and he's the one who said to me, he might never shoot someone again, but he has not come to terms with his controlling behavior and he could still hurt somebody without killing them. He could still cause damage. I want to talk a little bit about filming the day, of that most recent parole hearing. This is in 2025. There's this really sort of tender moment with you, Erin, that you're driving in the back seat. You're with, Harriet, who's Kina's mom, and you sort of reach out to touch her hand. Can you tell me about, what was happening in that moment? Well, we all know, Emery, that we're not supposed to ever become part of a story. And I try really hard not to, but I've worked at 48 hours for such a long time, and you spend so much time with people. It wasn't that I just reached out to touch her. She said to me that she was shaking. She's a 92-year-old woman who is going to her 13th parole hearing, was very worried that the man who killed her daughter could get out and hurt someone else, and I just put my hand on hers and she was shaking and, that it was just the right thing to do at that moment. But it really lets you know that it never gets easier. You would think by 13 you would, know exactly what to expect, know exactly what you want the board members to hear, but it's still like this emotional upheaval to yet to go there again. Yes. This was, she said, as tough almost as the first one. Wow. In fact, you sat with Harriet and the family in the conference room and watched the parole hearing. We 48 hours couldn't bring cameras in there, so it was just kind of you in there with the family. But tell me what that was. Like? Well, I felt very blessed to be able to sit in there because we were not allowed to record any of it, but they did. Commissioners allowed me to sit in. And so, of course, I was dying of curiosity to get a sense of who Stephen Burns was. There were other people that he had encountered during prison, according to a complaint brought up at previous parole hearings. A couple of instructors said that he made them uncomfortable. Were they women? The instructors? Women. Yes. Both instructors were women. One when she wouldn't allow him into a class that he wanted to get into, and another when he did not think he got the grade he deserved, and what it wasn't so much that he said something to them that wasn't the problem, but that the way he said it, and the way he felt entitled, and I think you could hear it from the commissioner that the commissioners believed the same thing, that he could not hear himself. He could not see his own behavior as troubling as it was, and so they found him unsuitable. He has not accepted what he did back then. That's what the family's concerned about. Yeah. Just as an aside, this is a family who opened their doors and their heart to a young man, and like to that level of betrayal to welcome him into your home. Because Kina's father sort of took him a little bit under his wing, right? Oh my gosh, yes. And Nana saw him as, the sports, the athlete. she was an athlete, and so he was like a brother and she trusted him. And the girls felt so betrayed by the guy across the street that took away their big sister and changed their lives forever. Right? It was a betrayal to every person in that family. And you had mentioned a little bit earlier that it kind of changed the trajectory of their lives in certain ways. That was eye-opening to me too. Just how much this one act affected this family forever. Harriet, with her victims group where she helped change the law and still goes to work every day at age 92. And then you have Nina, who had to testify by herself, and that because of that awful experience became a prosecutor focusing on victims of abuse, so that other people don't have to go through that. And then Regina, who, remembering that her sister died in a hospital, became a nurse. So, it was an awful thing that this family went through, but every member of that family made their tragedy better for other people. Absolutely. You know, Erin, like every once in a while, people will ask me, isn't it sort of depressing to work on these sort of stories? And I always say no, because for every story there's heroes. And here you have a entire family that are heroic in their efforts to make sure that no one else becomes a victim the way that their loved one became. You know, Amory, I'm just like you. People say, how can you deal with this after all these years, Erin? And I go, because I don't think about the horror. I think about the heroes. I love that. I absolutely love that. Erin, another great hour. It was really an interesting way to sort of delve into the story. We don't talk enough about the parole system, what's great about it, but also what's really challenging about it, especially for the families of the victims. So, thank you so much. Thank you, Emery. I'll be back, as you know. I know you will. And if you like this series, post-mortem, please like and follow Criminal Chronicles.